You know, I always like to start my story, like my golden years were between 2 and 4, because at that point, everything was sort of bright and easy. And then something developed, and I would say it's the mental states. And I entered in about 5 or 6. It was weird, like we'd have portraits of my family when I was really young. And I looked like a little cherub, and my sisters and my brothers and my mother and father. Then around 7 or 8, there'd be pictures taken, and it looked like I was pasted into them, or I was looking at my mother suspiciously. Something that happened along the way where that mental state got developed, and I started to be concerned about myself. Yeah. And the concern was sort of on the negative side. I thought something was inherently wrong with me, and I didn't want anyone to find out. So a lot of song and dances started quite young, of trying to keep everyone at bay, so to speak. And I felt that sense of separation, or sort of living like you're in an aquarium, you know, like a thick screen or a thick glass between me and everything else. And when I came in AA and they explained to me the root of the problem, which was this obsession with self, was that how they saw it at the time, I remembered certain situations in my life. And I remember this one time I was walking through the hallway at school. I was about 11 years old, and a pretty girl said hello to me, and I went home and wondered what she meant by it for about 5 hours. Yeah? And I went over every possible meaning that she could have had, and basically she probably just said hello and forgotten it the whole time, like in a minute. But for me, it was an incredibly profound event out of thousands of profound events every day. And so this sense of being obsessed with me was that root of the irritability, restless, and discontent. And what happened about, I remember I was 12 years old and I was playing Little League Baseball, and it was a night game. And my mother didn't come to the game. I was going to walk home by myself. And these older guys came in the dugout after the game with a bag of beer, and I had my first drink that night. 12 years old, and my athletic career came to a screeching halt because I had found what I'd been looking for. I didn't know what I was looking for, but when I found it, I knew that was it. And I got relief from that irritable restlessness and discontent. I didn't care about my batting average. Like when I'd be up at the plate in Little League, if somebody got up from the stands, I took it personally. I thought they were leaving because I was up there. It was that sort of incredible, ponderous sense of, it was like that point where when I was a kid, I'd be running around. It's funny because I wasn't in an abusive situation when I was a child. So when I was playing, it was a trip. I never was worrying, will I be playing next week? Yeah, and I didn't ask my mother to come into my room at night and go over my playing for the day. You know, did Wayne play better than me? I didn't have any of that going on because time hadn't set up yet. Yeah, and I wasn't trying to get into any moment because I hadn't entertained the insane idea I could be out of a moment yet. Yeah, I was just a kid, and then something happened. That mental state develops, and then one point I'd be just living and then doing things, and then after that the mental state developed. Everything I ever did was accompanied by thought. Yeah, it was gone over, it was preempted, it was just constantly going over stuff. So I had that drink and I got some freaking relief. But to see what happened is, as soon as I drank, I found out I had a magnetic appeal to people in uniform. As soon as I started to drink, I started to attract consequences, incredibly. Like, and talk about random, I mean insane random shit. Like, it would be impossible that you would get arrested that night and I'd be arrested. But the thing is, the alcoholic of my type is I'm willing to pay any consequence tomorrow not to feel uncomfortable now. And basically that was my imperative, that was my drive. And no matter what, and punishment wasn't working for me. Punishment wasn't stopping me from doing what I wanted to do. It was like I didn't even want to do it. It was very quickly I needed to do it. Because I needed relief like someone who has a disease needs medicine. I needed freaking drinking and doing drugs. So from about 12 to about 15 or 16, that disease developed and became more and more influential in my life. And 16, I got kicked out of high school in 10th grade. And at this point, I lived with my mother. My father had died when I was 9. I lived with my mother in a 2-family house. We actually became poor, but I didn't really get it in my head. And my mother had the bedroom, and I slept on a Castro convertible. And my mother had to work. So I was like, I got kicked out of school, and I just started hanging out at the house. And my brother would come over every once in a while, beat me up to try to, discipline me, but I knew I could outweight him. And I just ran roughshod over my mother, and I used the house for partying and shit like that. Kids cut school and came over, and I would go into blackouts, just drink so much that I didn't know what happened. And I'd wake up and the whole place would be fucked and everything. So what occurred is I didn't know what to do with myself. My mother tried to get me a few jobs, and I didn't stay with them. And so I was looking at my career choices, and I decided I wanted to have like a home business, out of my mother's home. And I started to sell drugs out of my mother's home. And we had a little cellar down below. You came in through the driveway. There was a glass door, and you'd go down the stairs, and there was a little room that I painted red, and I started to get those cut out suns and moons and stars that reflect after the light goes off. And I had Don Juan picking peyote posters and Jimi Hendrix, because back then Jimi Hendrix was like a god, and my friends would come over, and we had a little alcove, and I had a shower curtain, so if anyone got lucky with the opposite sex, they could go horizontal there. And then had my little mono speakers playing, and people would come over, and they'd come downstairs, or I'd just sell them from the staircase, the door, and then just party. Oblivious that my house was under surveillance for a couple of months. And so one night I came home. I was coming home. I was going to meet about 7 guys there, and I had 1,000 hits of LSD in the room. And I saw this construction light near a pothole, and it was blinking on and off. So I stole that, and I walked home with that. It had a big, huge battery. And then I put it in the middle room. It was going to be like a strobe light, So we all took some acid, drinking beer and everything, watching this light going on and off, and everyone's having a. There was an album. There was a song by Jimi Hendrix called "Third Stone to the Sun." Did you ever hear that? If you played it slow, he spoke like an alien visiting Earth. That's how we felt listening to this shit going on. And then, but what happened, there was a commotion at the door up the stairs. And then suddenly these 3 pot-bellied policemen rushed in, and the party was over, basically. And so they started to arrest all of us, and I was pretty quick on my feet. They said they found some of the acid. So they said, "What's this?" I said it was speed, because back then acid was like communism, Long Island suburbia, the way people thought. So I said it was speed, so we all get arrested, and we go to jail, we go to the police station. My other friends get released because it's my house and my stuff, but I stay there. Then they release me, and then I got to get rearrested because the lab report came back, and it was LSD, and so I got to give myself in again. And this set off trains of circumstances that brought me a lot of misfortune I felt I didn't deserve. So, because I wasn't going to stop doing what I was doing. So I kept getting arrested, especially like the first week of the next 4 months. I'd get arrested like once or twice the first week. So I had like 5 arrests. I was 17 years old. I got arrested for tons of shit. But the one that really amazed me is I got arrested for trying to leave the scene of the crime, which is impossible if you're the scene in the crime. So I was like, I could not believe what was happening. But it didn't deter me one bit. As soon as I got out of jail, I would just be doing what I was doing. But now I was more selective. I went to some friend's house and just did all my shit inside. So what occurred is from 17 to 20, I was on this pre-probation program. Just like probation, but they did it before you hit 18. And so after 20, when I hit 20, I was released on my own recognizance. This lawyer got me off on a B misdemeanor for all this stuff. And my family had a little meeting, and there was a majority decision that Paul should take his show on the road. He can't live with Mom anymore. So I went to Miami, It was that Saturday Night Fever. It was like I took my little John Travolta act, went to Miami, and from 77 to 80, I stayed there, and it was the highlight of my career because I didn't get arrested. And at this point, like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist. After a few years of active alcoholism, my idea of success was not to be arrested. That was what I was hoping for. So 17, when I was down in Florida, nothing happened like that. But the transmutation of me completely was finished there. Because if you did what I did, you would know I did it, yeah? You could see me at a bar or a club and you knew what I was into. And I knew what you were into. So what happened is I left Miami, I went back to New York, and I was trying to sort of get it together once again. And I used to be involved in the spiritual group when I was 20 to 20 something. And it kept me, at that point, wanting to know God was a sufficient enough reason for me to stop using. So from about 19 to 22, I had been meditating and doing all this stuff. But as soon as I got disappointed in the guru, the spiritual teacher, and the whole thing, I went back to get drinking and using. Now, I moved back to New York in 1980 because Florida was flipping me out. I was freebasing down there, which was a really scary thing with this, it's just a wild situation. So I went home, and I was trying to get it together, and I went to this meeting, a spiritual meeting that night in Long Island, and on the way back, I stopped at a bar where my friend was the bartender. Now, this is January 30th, 1980. It's freezing cold. It's a Sunday night. No one's out, yeah? I go in the bar. There's my friend and the waitress. He gives me a Quaalude. I have a couple of shots of Grand Marnier. I go back to my sister's house, and you would think that would be it, but it wasn't it. My head was irritable, restless, discontent, and started to advertise in my head that I was missing a big party. A big party erupted at the bar, and I was missing out on something. So I got back in my car. I drove to the bar, the Phineas Teas on Merrick Road, Baldwin, Long Island. And the last thing I remember was the light in the car going out when you closed the door. Now, I woke up somewhere. My face looked like, my nose looked huge, and my mouth was super dry. And I saw my sister-in-law in a doorway, and by the look in her face, I knew I was fucked. And I had been run over twice by the same car. Only an alcoholic can have that happen. The guy hit me, didn't know what he hit, so he backed up, and he backed up over me. So I never got to the bar, which I found out later was still inhabited by only two people, the bartender and the waitress. So I thought I was missing out on a party, but I had a date with a Monte Carlo Chevy. So I woke up, and suddenly my movie has shifted to a hospital melodrama, and I'm the star. I'm fucking laying there. I had gotten destroyed. I had 10 compound fractures in the legs, broken hip, broken shoulder, lacerated stomach, and man, you would think that would have been a sufficient moment to surrender, but it wasn't. I spent 10 months in a hospital bed. Oh man. And got released. I spent 2 months in the hospital, 8 months at my sister's house in a hospital bed. And 10 months, at the 12-month mark, I got out 10 months. I could start walking on crutches. And my friend lived in California, Santa Cruz, an old friend from Brooklyn. And he offered me a job because he didn't want me to be back in New York anymore. In the winter, it's like a drag with crutches. You could slip easy on ice and shit. And I'd already hurt my knee again from it. So I got a job out in Santa Cruz, California. A chance for a whole new life, yeah? So I get there, and what happens, I reproduce the same old life. So now I'm going to clubs on crutches, selling coke, and it's fucking pathetic. But I just reproduced the same Paul, once again. So I moved 80 to 81, I was there, and then I moved to San Francisco, and that was like, it was the tailspin of all tailspins. And now people talk about hitting their bottom. See, when I hit a bottom, I moved in, man. I lived there. And I lived with great anxiety because I knew I'd be evicted to a worse bottom, but I was trying to make hay while the making was good. So I was just living a day at a time. I was practicing some of the AA principles. I really was. Think was happening quite a lot, and a day at a time was happening quite a lot. But 1985, I had an accident on the job. I overdosed, yeah, and I ended up in a hospital, St. Francis in San Francisco. Again, it was wild because I went out. I was with my friend. We can talk of drugs, yes? Yeah, no big deal. So I was with my friend who I used to get high. I used to shoot a lot of cocaine. That was my drug of choice. And I used to shoot cocaine with him, but he had gone to heroin. So I went and we did a speedball, but he gave me too much heroin, so I went out. And it was really actually a nice experience. I was sitting in a bed, laying in a bed, and I just was looking at the corner of the room, and suddenly the whole room sucked in, and I was seemingly gone. And suddenly I came to on my ass in the middle of a room, and all these people yelling excitedly around me, and they were shooting me up with Narcan. And I was fucking saved, and I was fucking pissed because the same movie was happening. The police were there, and I was going to get arrested one more time. So they sent me to the hospital, and then the police left around 5:30 in the morning. They must have been called off to go somewhere else. And then I got out at 8:30, went to where I was living. Now I had spent all the rent money, and my landlady lived there. She was going to be home at 6. She was at work. So I got there at 10. And to me, that was 10 to 6 was like an alcoholic eternity. I kicked back, drank all her liquor, watched TV, started using her phone, and around 5:30, I'm getting worried. What am I going to do? She'll be here any minute. I had the whole day to plan my escape. So 5:30, I go, what am I going to do? And so my memory goes, there's a place down the street because his girlfriend, who became an ex-girlfriend quickly, she had brought me to this place in San Francisco at 8th and Fulton called Delancey Street, which is a living program, yeah, mostly for convicts. And I walked in there unbeknownst to what was going on. When I asked her what was going on, I went back out, she was gone. So here I am about 48th and Fulton, about 40 streets away, and it dawned on me, I'm gonna go to this place. So I walked to Delancey Street, and when you walked into this program, they had a bench on the side, and when you sat on the bench, it was supposed to signify you lost the game of life, that you're sort of malleable to something. But I wasn't. I was watching a video of myself in my head, and I see this clock across the way, and it said 6 o'clock, and I said to myself, I'm going to give them to 6:30 or I'm out of here. Like I had a lot of important engagement to keep. I had nowhere to go. I had no money, but I'm putting on, I'll give them 30 minutes, you know. So 6:28, they brought me into a room to interview me to see if I was worthy of Delancey Street. So they asked me all these questions. They're all going over my head. I'm not really listening. And then they asked me something I'm really keen on. They go, do you want a place to stay tonight? Which is what I wanted. And I said, yes. So they said, you got to make a 2-year commitment. So I went, what? So I said, okay. And by 6:30, I was a full-fledged member of this program, 300 clients. And the amazing thing was, I stayed there for 2 years. And it proved to be a big enough buffer between me, where I stayed sober. Yeah, I didn't drink or use for 2 years. And I started to feel good about myself in life. And I went to college and everything. But after about a year of being in there, I started to think again, which was the problem. And I was thinking about my problem, and I said it's narcotics, which were true. And I said, but I could probably drink, which I filed in my head. I didn't run it by anyone in the program. I just filed it up there and went about my business. And at the 20-month mark, they brought me in a room and they asked me to stay 5 more years. And I said, no, I don't really want to stay 5 more years. They said, well, there's a workout program. And if you take this workout program, it'll take 4 months, and then you'll be finished 2 years. And if you fulfill the requirements, you can graduate. And see, Delancey Street was a trip because the way they presented themselves was they had 90-something% success rate. of people keeping people sober. But you had to look at the fine print. You could never leave Delancey Street. You could have to live there your whole life if you. So I didn't really want to live in a little institution. So there I was. So I got this workout program, got a job, bought a Toyota Corolla, got a checking account, and at the 4-month mark, all I had to do was find a place to live. And I did. These 2 young girls lived there. I could afford it. There was about 20 other people looking at the place, but I looked pretty good at the time. I had khaki pants, blue blazer, hadn't drank or used for 2 years. And they liked me, and they liked Dr. Jekyll. And they said, Dr. Jekyll, you can move in. And I signed a lease as Dr. Jekyll, but Mr. Hyde was going to be moving in. And I believed, Delancey Street had told me that period of my life being Mr. Hyde, though rather long, was over. I was going to be Dr. Jekyll from this point on. And I was hoping they were right, but I had a strong suspicion they weren't right. And I moved in, and as soon as I left the confines of Delancey Street, when I got off of work, I didn't know what to do with myself, first of all. Got off at 5, I'm not going to go to bed till 11, and it seemed like, what the hell am I going to do? No one was telling me what to do. So my head started to go off, again, ran a beautiful advertisement of what I'd been missing the last 2 years, with absolutely not fact-based at all, just or mythical. And I believed it, and I drove my Toyota Corolla, which I was going to lose in 2 days, to this bar called the Rose and Thistle. We used to call it the Nose and Sniffle there, in San Francisco. And I went in, armed with this idea I could drink, but I'm incredibly obsessed with self, and I'm thinking the bartender's going to remember me, and he's going to think, you should not have a drink, but he doesn't remember me anymore. I walk in, and I order my first beer in 2 years. Now, I drink it, and nothing happens. Seems to have impunity, yeah? But then I order the second beer. And as halfway through the second beer, what happens? I want more, yeah? Now, whatever more is to you, it could be alcohol, it could be anything, but I wanted more. And the funny thing is, if I didn't drink, narcotics would have been a million miles away. But as soon as I drank, the next step was going to be narcotics, yeah? So I started looking around the room, looking to see if I could see anybody I used to know. And the same guy that used to sell cocaine there was still selling coke at this bar. He had like a franchise in the place. So I kissed his ass. He sold me some coke. I went out to my car, and I did a line of coke. And it was like that movie, The Shining, where Jack Nicholson goes through the bathroom door near the end to Here's Johnny. It was exactly like that. And my experience of alcoholism, I see it as a mental parasite, or it's a possessor. It takes our system over, it takes the host over, and it uses us for transportation, basically. So that's what happened. I introduced a parasite, woke up, I went on a 10-month run, and if you've ever been on a run, it's sort of a misnomer, because you're usually limping after the first few weeks, and then you're sort of crawling, and then you're dragged back to that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. Times about 10, because I'd gone to college, I'd been clean for 2 years, my horizons looked good, and there it was, worse than ever. I mean, it was unbearable, really. So what happened is, I ended up on this run, and what happened, I went on St. Patrick's Day, 1987, I think, whenever, 1988. March 17th, I went out. March 18th, I found myself 2 hours north of San Francisco, not knowing how I got there. March 19th, or 20th, I came to in a trailer park in Calistoga near this hang gliding airport, sitting with a guy who I didn't know, you know, and he had a big freaking head, and bulbous nose and varicose veins. We were passing a bottle of Royal Gate vodka back and forth, back in California. We call it the gate you enter at the end, the Royal Gate, about 80 cents a pipe. So, and I looked at the guy and I said to myself, this guy's a fucking bum, you know? But he was looking back at me like I was a bum. And that's when something happened, you know? Something I didn't know could happen, which is the thought system stopped. And something downloaded. It was like a CNN news flash, just a headline, no story, and the headline was, I'm fucked. Now, I had been fucked for quite a while, but it seems to escape our attention how deeply fucked we are. The muscle denial is like Arnie Schwarzenegger's, you know, it keeps a lot of reality out. And it all collapsed on me. And then suddenly I had new thoughts, and the new thought was, I got to get out of this trailer. So I got up, I went to the phone booth, and I called Delancey Street, and I asked them if I could come back, and they said no. They had been getting my newsletter for the last 10 months, and they realized, they said, no, you can come back in about a month and have another interview. Doesn't mean you're going to get in or not. And in this download, what happened, some honesty had come back for the first time, and I said the first honest thing I'd said in 10 months, which is, I don't think I have a month yet. I just felt really a terminal sense was going on. So I called a lady up I used to party with, and I must have sounded very humble or whatever, and she decided to try to help me one more time. She drove up to Calistoga, it's about an hour and a half from San Francisco, and in that time I had a miraculous alcoholic recovery. I wanted to get loaded again. So I get in a car, and the thing is, I don't know about you, but the last year or so of my activities out there, the main dilemma was I had a huge urge to get something, but I had no money to get it. So I had to talk others into doing what I wanted to do. And my success rate had been going down every year to that level. So I was really fucking pissed, yeah? Really pissed. And so I got in the car and I'm talking it to her into, hey, let's get a 6-pack of talls, get the dirty magazines, rent the hotel room, cop the Coke. And she had followed that equation with me many times, hadn't been that satisfying for her. So she said, no, we're not doing that, Paul. And she says, do you want a place to stay tonight? It sounded very familiar to the deal 2 years and 8 months ago. I go, yeah. She says, you got to go to an AA meeting. I'll take you to one. And it seemed like incredible progress. The last time I had to deal was 2-year commitment. She wants 1 hour. I go, sure. So she took me to a men's meeting, dropped me off there, Salvation Army. Cesar Chavez and Valencia in San Francisco. And what happened there is I felt hope, to tell you the truth. And the hope allowed me to feel how hopeless I was, basically. Yeah. And the next day, that night, I went home, and the miracle really happened. Because in the morning when I woke up at her house, I slept in her closet because her roommate didn't want me to be there. I'm 6'2", the closet was 6 feet. It was a little cramped in there. But I woke up, and that urge to escape had been diminished, yeah, and I could think of things. And I said, you know what, I better call this AA thing and see if they have an earlier meeting than 8 o'clock, because I'm not going to make it till 8 o'clock at night. So I did. I called up phone book and everything, and they told me there was a meeting at 12 down at 17th and Guerrero, high noon. And that was my home group. I went to that meeting, and I've never stopped going now since. And the funny thing was, that day in that trailer, sobriety was downloaded in me. The whole kit and caboodle, and it's just been expressing in time for 30 years now. Because the urge to drink and thoughts about drinking and using, I've never had. So I have been gifted that beautiful statement is the problem does not exist for me. I don't need that many skillful means. I need skillful means about how to live. I don't need skillful means about drinking and using, because I have none urge, ever. It's like I don't have a thought to combat, which is incredible. It is the greatest solution I've ever seen demonstrated in my life. It took the thing that was the most influential, fucking corroding effect of my life, and that no human power could change, because my mother wanted it to change, my friends wanted it to change, my enemies wanted it to change, the state wanted it to change. No human power could get me sober. Something struck me sober. And my whole program is based on that I'm fucked. Because I realize completely I am not managerial quality. And to me, the real problem, the real meaning of the first step is the second part of it for the way of life, which is I am not managerial quality. And it wasn't caused by my drinking and using. My unmanageability is caused by my trying to manage it. That's the fucking cause of it. One of my ways of managing my own unmanageability was drinking and using. That's why I drank and used. My managing was failing. I did not know how to live life on life's terms. So I just took the fucking easy way out. Just get loaded as much as possible. Yeah? So what happened then, I was easily, and to me, well, we'll go into it now, right? Are we going to record that now, or is it on? Oh, it's on.
Yeah, it's on.
So the first step, as it says in recovery in the book, is a reflective step. You're reflecting on before you got sober, yes? The second step is a reflective step, and you're reflecting on after you got sober. So to me, the second step is an observational step. So you just, but let's go to the first thing. So the powerless, it says in our book, the dilemma is powerlessness, but there is no dilemma with powerlessness if you accept powerlessness. The dilemma with powerlessness is that you keep exerting power. Yeah? So when you exert power, you experience powerlessness. You get frustrated, you're pissed off and shit like that. Yeah? But if you admit your powerlessness, you'll never experience powerlessness. You'll feel power. Yeah? It's a weird thing. See, I'm not going to say we, but I can actually say we, because we're all dealing, the problem resides in the mind. Yeah? It's the thought system is the activity of alcoholism. Yeah? Because it interprets feelings and situations and perceptions to bring about threats when there aren't any threats, to make mountains out of molehills, and to allow false evidence to appear real to us all fucking day. And of course, we're responding to something that's not real. How can there be a solution to that unless you see that it's not happening? Yeah? So, to me, the thought system is the delivery system of the disease. And it's like, I feel alcoholism is a parasitical mental movement. Yeah? That's what I feel. And the thing is, like any other parasite, it needs a host, yeah, to live. And the parasite of alcoholism is incredibly hostile. And any host, if it could recognize it, would throw it off in a second. Just like if it was a huge bug with 50 teeth fangs and landed on you once, you'd knock it off in a second. And the 100th time it landed on, you'd knock it off in a second. So knowing its own nature is truly aberrant to the host. It has to have an incredible strategy. And my belief is the parasite convinces us it's us through the thought system. We start living as the parasite. We start living for the parasite. We become really like transportation for the parasite. So you should see there's a lot of new research on parasites in nature, which is a very good example of alcoholism. And there's this one, the first one I ever got introduced was about a mushroom. Comes out of a family called the cordyceps. There's many of them, yeah? And it's an amazing thing. The cordyceps has one drive, and that's to reproduce, yes? Like everything in nature. But it's got a very weak system. It's got spores that it has to hope gets caught on an animal that walks by or the wind blows it to the right place, yes? So this mushroom decides, no fucking way, I'm gonna have a smart bomb when it comes to this. So what it does, it lands on ants, and it burrows into the ant and jacks into its brain and tells the ant where the cordyceps wants to go. Yeah? So the mushroom now uses the ant as its delivery system. Hey, let's go to a dank, dark place where mushrooms grow much better. As soon as it arrives at where it wants to go, it kills the ant and grows out of its head. Yeah? It's amazing, yeah? But now the cordyceps, this is more amazing. Each species of the cordyceps lands on different insects. They don't just take ants, they take all different kinds, but they use them the exact same way. It sounds like alcoholism to me. If you take a sociological story, like let's say San Francisco, an urban area, there's thousands and thousands of us there, and many of us are men, let's say, and obviously a lot of women. And if you see how many of those people with all different ethnicities, educations, intelligence, financial situations end up at the three same parking spaces of institution, jails, and death, you got to see there's one driver of the fleet of Fords. Yeah? That's where the relief lies. The relief isn't going to you're not going to have relief from your alcoholism. You'll get relief from our alcoholism when you see it as a disease, not as a personal fucking condition. Yeah? In my view. I'm talking only from my own experience, and I'm talking about the problem from solution. I have relief from the fucking problem. That's the only way you're going to know about it. You're not going to know about the problem from the problem. You know about the problem from the solution. You get relief from the problem, and then it's reverse engineering, basically. You realize when you start having stabilized relief, it shows you why you didn't seem to have stabilized relief. And it's sort of like being in a movie theater and you can't see the movie because there's big fucking heads in the way, and then you keep yelling at it, and finally you realize it's your fucking head. That's the solution. Really, that's the solution. So the first step, the powerlessness, is over alcohol and drugs and everything else. It's like we say, they probably say it here, it's like you're dancing with a gorilla, you're going to stop when the gorilla wants to stop. Yeah? So truly, if you truly get the sense of powerlessness, it brings about great relief from guilt and shame. Because this is what happened to me. I was in the program, I was less than a year, I was enjoying the hell out of it. I was with a friend of mine. We were both riding these motorcycles, and I had a prospective girlfriend, my fairy princess of mine. He had an established girlfriend. We go back to his apartment. There's these stairs. We're walking up there. This lady comes down the stairs. Her blue jeans have all paint on them. She says hello to my friend. We walk in. We all walk into his place. He goes downstairs. He forgot something on his bike, comes back, and he says, "Oh, my neighbor would like to talk to you, Paul." And I'm thinking, because I'm a house painter, I'm going to give her some fucking, tips, because she's painting her apartment. She walks into the room, and there's the girlfriend I'm trying to impress and everything. And she goes, "Hello, Paul, do you remember me?" I go, "No." She says, "You owe me $500. And you would think I would have felt a little embarrassed, especially with the babe and everything, or shame. I did not feel any of it because I had gotten powerlessness. And I looked at her, and I paid her $500 that day. And I looked at her and I told her, I would have done to you what I did to you to anyone unless you could have physically stopped me. Yeah, I had gotten the disease aspect of the program. I had listened to what they were explaining to me, and it brought me relief from the guilt and shame of what I thought I did under the influence, because I didn't really have much say what I did under the influence. I was going to do whatever that fucking thing commanded me to do. Yeah? Why is it that so many people are still garnering so much guilt and shame from the behavior they seem to have exhibited while they were getting loaded, when the whole first step is our way out, which it says we were powerless over it? It doesn't mean you were powerless over drinking it. It means everything that ensued thereafter. That's the relief. The relief is radical. It's not a drip, 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 drip thing. If you can see what it is, you'll realize it ain't you. It's a parasite. It's like when I would go to meetings for the first few months, I walked in, coming into AA, I had a thick shell of terminal uniqueness, man. Yeah, it was, I thought no one could understand me, no one felt like I did, and especially no one did the heinous things I had done. And you know what we do at the meetings is people talk about their feelings, their thoughts, their reactions in life. And after a few months, I could only come to two conclusions. How did these people get my thoughts, or they're not my thoughts? And you hear it at so many meetings. People are right at that point of, oh, it's amazing how you think just like me and you feel just like me. And yes, if we think so much alike, they can't be ours. If we're all having them, they can't be our thoughts. They're alcoholic thoughts. And if you can see them as not yours, you'll get some space between you and them. And the space, what will that do? It'll beget more space. Once you get a flavor of freedom, you'll eat the whole meal. Yeah? That's the beauty of it. So here, all right, so that we're gonna do the steps? All right, so the first
Anything
step.
you wanna do. You
So
wanna
the
take
first
break
and the
or-
second is the unmanageability part. And to me, the first step, I like the statement in the book better than the step, because I admitted many times to tons of people I was an alcoholic and a drug addict to get more drugs and more alcohol. But I like the statement, an admittance to your innermost self, because that's what happened in that trailer park. I had no idea that there was an innermost. It went through that horizontal fucking story of Paul and went somewhere and struck gold, and it ended it. Yeah. So I believe there is an innermost self, or that unsuspecting inner resource, or what you ever want to call it, but you're not going to access it through the head. It's like vertical and the head is horizontal. They meet at every second, but the vertical insertion is the spirit. The horizontal story is the mental state. And never the two really shall meet. So the first step to me is that, the sense of powerlessness, and then the unmanageability, and realizing it was caused by my managing. That's it, completely. Yeah? And that it wasn't a cause and effect, because I believed it was when I first came in. So when I stopped drinking and using, I thought all those demonstrations of behavior were going to stop, but I was still doing the same shit without cocaine. So I realized I was wrong, that it wasn't, the drinking and using caused my life to be unmanageable. It wasn't drinking and using. The drinking and using was really was a solution to the unmanaging. So the second step, again, to me, was purely observational. If you listen to it, it says, came to believe. So it's actually saying it's already happened. So how did I come to believe? Not by saying the second step, but by following the suggestions of the people in the meetings. And after 2 months, I saw I hadn't used. So I had come to believe that some power, right, had restored me to sanity. And the way they talk about it, the sanity they're talking about is the sanity that precedes the first drink. They're not talking about the insanity concerning women or shit like that. That comes later. But it's the insanity that precedes the first drink. That's the target of AA. And I had to admit I hadn't had a drink in 2 months. So I had come to believe that something greater than myself had restored me to sanity, because it had. It was an observation. And then immediately, that's supposed to prime the pump to going, hey, if it can do that, I'm going to turn my will and my life over to its care. Now, this is the trick, because if your will and life was under your own care, the program would have stopped at step 3. It would have been done, right? But it isn't, is it? It's been taken over by the parasite of alcoholism. So I cannot turn my will, my life over to the care of anyone else. It's already in the care of the fucking parasite. And it's not going to give it up. So I have to do steps 4 through 9 to weaken the grip of the parasite. So it's the action steps that bring the spirit to the third step. The third step is just conceptual in a way until the 4 through 9 breaks the fucking hold of the parasite. Then when you're hearing people talking about the third step, they're the ones that did all the steps. That's when the spirit is infused in the third step. So 4 through 9 is the way that decision gets power. Because I believe the parasite, like anything of itself, is the only power it's going to respect is a higher power than it. It does in our condition, it doesn't respect us at all. Yeah, but it's sort of like a little dog parading like a big dog. When you introduce the big dog through 4 through 9, the little dog rolls over. Yeah, that's how I see it. And then again, if you see alcoholism as a dog, a big motherfucking dog, if it's asleep, you don't want to tease it. You get the run of the whole house while it's asleep. Let it fucking stay asleep. You know? So the second step for me was observational. I was doing what they said, and I was not drinking and using. Yeah? And then so the third step, I already had the experience of the third step. In my life, I had surrendered to Delancey Street for 2 years. They had told me, they ran my whole life. And I didn't like them when I left. I didn't like their principles, but I had to begrudgingly admit they did a much better job with me than I ever did. Yeah? So I could look around this room. Now, I wouldn't turn my life over to every one of you, but many of you, and you would do a better job with it than I do. Because it's weird. You would think your vested interest would promote you, but your vested interest is part of the problem. Because it's been misdirected by the parasite. Your yearning for freedom has been co-opted because you're trying to be free as the parasite when the freedom is from. Like it says, please relieve us of the bondage of self. The bondage of self is the mental state. That's the bondage of self, believing the thoughts about yesterday and tomorrow. That's the realm, that's where this mental state plays God. It's in time. You're not going to meet a God in the past or the future. The only God you're going to meet is the self. And it's going to tell you what happened, and it's going to tell you what's going to happen. Only here and now is the freedom. So, step 3, turn my will, my life over to the care of a higher power. What is it? Of your own understanding, yes? Now, a lot of people keep holding that for 20-something years, but in the book it says that's an introductory point of turning it to a higher power of your own understanding. As you move forward, that's usually going to change. And to me, how it changes, I'm turning my will, my life over to the care of a higher power of its own understanding. I do not want to have a higher power of my understanding. It's going to be quite small and weak. I want a higher power of its own understanding. I like life being revelatory, yes? I like the I don't know and then finding out. Because it's grand and it's large and it's spacious and it's inclusive and it's win-win, yeah? So a higher power of its own understanding. So the third step, to me, is the spirit of the whole program. But if you look at the program as a linear process, the 1 through 12, then the most important unspoken step of the program is quit playing God. Because it says it before you go into the third step, it says first, you have to quit playing God. Next, then it's the third step. So if you see it a linear importance, then that has more importance than the third step. But this is the trick. This is what I saw. If that which is playing God right now hears the statement of quit playing God, if that which is playing God tries to quit playing God, isn't that playing God? And wouldn't it go on ad infinitum? Yeah? So if the self, if the parasite hears that message, hears the message, quit playing God, and it's the activity of that which is playing God, and it tries to quit playing God, that's playing God. I've been introduced to a lot of spiritual groups all around the world, and there's nothing. One of the highest statements of all spirituality is the statement in recovery: self cannot get out of self. And if this is like a spiritual shoe store, and we lay that out, and you put your foot in there, and it makes you feel like, whoa, wait a minute, that sounds like that's what I've been trying to do for 20 years, fucking wear the shoe. Self cannot get out of self. Then so if you're identified as a self, and then as the self, being identified with trying to get out of self, it's not going to happen. Does that fit your experience right now? Does that seem to be what's going on? Am I in the condition of self trying to get out of self? It's a nice question to ask, because there is a solution, because I think in the book it says we are the problem. So if we are the problem, and also the solution at the same time, how could that seem to be so? It would have to mean that the solution is become identified as something that it's not, which is the problem. So if you see you're not that, you'll start finding out what you are. Instead of looking for what you are from what you're not, just see what you're not and you'll be what you are. That's how it's worked with me. It's a different logic than the mental logic. And the mental logic sounds totally logical when you're in it, But it's insane if you look at it from outside. It's fucking an insane logic that you're separate, that I have private thoughts, that I'm behind my cheekbone, I stop here, and then you start there. It's totally fucking insane. And that really the thought system that we're listening to thinks what's not happening is more important than what's happening. Because it's using now to think about yesterday and tomorrow, every fucking moment. Why would you want to have that be your GPS? Why would you want to have a GPS that has a theme of, if something's going really well, you get suspicious in like 5 or 10 minutes, but if you feel a little weird, you think it's the beginning of a lifelong depression. Why would you want to live under that theme? Yeah? It shortens the good and elongates the possibility of bad all day. There is a solution, seriously, but not for you. That's the good news. So, this is my humble feeling. This is my humble feeling. I don't believe the root of the problem is obsession with self. I believe the root of the problem is identification as a self. I truly believe the parasite has us believing we're the parasite. And so when you want to be free, you're wanting to be free as the parasite, when the freedom is from the parasite, yeah? When you're wanting to be happy, joyous, and free, you want to be happy, joyous, and free as a self. Yeah. Instead of finding out that you're happy, joyous, and free by realizing you're not a self. Yeah. Like some people have said to me here, you're a spiritual being having a human experience.
But I'm behind enemy lines.
Yes. So I'm just sharing what worked for me, because for that experience of the problem not existing for you to stabilize, it has to be seen that the problem doesn't exist as you. That's how it really stabilized in me, yeah? You can have an experience of being out of self as a self. You can have an experience, but it's not going to turn into a state. But when you realize you're not a self, that becomes a state. So now you're not surrendering, then taking back, and surrendering, taking back. You're in surrendered, yes? Things have become very clear for you. You're not looking for what can't be found. Yeah? Yeah. There's a great master, many of them. St. Francis of Assisi says this beautiful statement: what's looking is what you're looking for. So right now, what's looking? He didn't say who's looking. It says what's looking is what you're looking for. He didn't say what's looking and then 50 pages of requirements you have to meet to become the you that you're looking for. It's what's looking right now is what you're looking for. We're all inherently awake right now. I think most of everyone's day is trying not to be awake, really. Yeah? Unfortunately, a lot of our awakeness is concerning the thoughts, and they're driving us fucking crazy. Isn't it, really? So this idea to me changed everything, because, and I saw self or as the parasite. There's a statement that changed my world in AA on page 64. It states right before you go to the inventory process, it says being convinced, and that's an activity right now. So right now I am being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what has defeated us. So being convinced, meaning right now, self manifested in various ways is what has defeated us. Now, if self was us, yeah, then that book would have been about 4,000 pages, because it would have had to say, being convinced that Paul, Jim, Mary, so tons of names is what has defeated us, but it isn't. It's being convinced that self, one fucking modality, manifested in a lot of ways, pity, self this, self that, has defeated us. If we're convinced of that, we will now look at some of its manifestations, common manifestations, some of what's self's manifestations. And in the next paragraph it says resentment, yeah? So if you follow this statement, resentment in this view, is seen as a manifestation of self in one's life. Why do we keep calling them ours? If Stanley is expressing through me, let's say, manifesting into my life through me, and then his manifestations, I keep calling them mine, I must be identified as Stanley. That's it. Self is manifesting through us into our lives and defeating us through those manifestations. And how does it do it? We're claiming them to be our manifestations. Just like most people claim our alcoholism as my alcoholism. But the whole program, the steps start with we. It's our alcoholism. We share it like a disease. The mental state makes it personal. That's how it sustains itself. If you heard your thoughts with a disclaimer underneath their Stanley's, you wouldn't fucking follow Stanley's thoughts for a fucking minute. But you've been listening to the same thoughts framed as yours for 40 years. What's the glue? What's the honey on the thought? It isn't the thought, it's the mind. There's the act of claiming. The mental state is claiming your actions, thoughts, feelings, and making them yours, and then you're bound by them. You have a thought, you call it yours, it now owns you. You have a feeling, you call it yours, now it ruins your day. It's a slavery. Complete slavery. If the thought system reigns supreme, you're living an interpretation based on what's not happening. That's basically what's going on. We're not responding to life, we're reacting to yesterday and tomorrow. It's like a charade in a way. Yeah? The zing of it's gone. You're not even close to the pulse of living. You're on yesterday's news, bringing it back up and projecting it into the future. You're not, the mental state is, but we're identified with the mental state. So we think it's about us. Yeah. When someone comes over to my house, I would love to be a psychiatrist, and my specialty would be what's not happening. Because I could book about 60 people in one day. They all think they're going to get an hour of therapy. They come in, start bitching about what's not happening. I say, that's not happening, see you next week. And I'd be fucking, I could retire by noontime. Really? Because isn't that the case? If you're fucked up today, it's never based on today. It's based on yesterday or next week. Yes or no? Find out. I mean, it says you got to get to the exact nature of the wrong and look at the causes and conditions. The causes and conditions are mental conditions. So to me, the steps, what they do is diminish a mental condition, so the spiritual condition that's already available at all times becomes obvious to us, basically. Yeah. And then suddenly, the maintenance of a spiritual condition, to me, the highest form of maintenance is to be a spiritual condition. Why would I want to try to maintain a spiritual condition as a body or as a mental state? It fucking never works. You got to keep working on it constantly. Freedom isn't vigilance. And it's not concentration. It's not focused. It's like dispersed awakeness. You're awake. You're awake to being awake. Yeah. Nothing special. It's like ordinary dog shit awareness, really, all day. But you never get gypped again, ever. You're in every second of every fucking moment you're in. Yeah, you're alive constantly. So, I mean, it's some shit you see you may not want to see, but you're gonna see it. It's just like, if you look at conscious contact, the way I view conscious contact is the basis of life. Consciousness is in contact, yeah? We're seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. That's not us. Something is moving through us. And through us and through this camera, through this lens maker, it sees, hears, feels, tastes, and touches. Yeah, that's the experience. I remember when I was young, I was 9 years old, one of my favorite uncles died. And so my mom took me to the funeral, and it was an open casket, so she brought me up to say goodbye to Uncle Fred. And when I looked in, I had an immediate hit, that ain't Uncle Fred. Yeah. The body was still there, but the animating principle wasn't there. And I had mistaken or misidentified Fred as the body. But when the spirit that was Fred was gone, it was obvious that fucking Uncle Fred was like a Toyota. Yeah? And why would I make that mistake unless I was making a mistake with me? Yes?
Take a break in about 5 or 15 minutes.
All right, sure, yeah.
Wherever you find a breaking point, just
Right now is good. Yeah.
All right, real quick, let me make a quick
That's good,
announcement. If you haven't settled